Unemployment continues to increase in South Africa. This was reflected in the latest quarterly labour force survey. On the positive side, the data also showed that the number of people discouraged from even looking for work has now decreased. This week, we expect inflation data and the Monetary Policy Committee's decision on the repo rate. Joining me now to talk about the economic week that was and what's coming up this week is Hugo Pienaar. He's the Chief Economist at the Bureau for Economic Research. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Hugo. And let's start with that reflection on the unemployment data that came through. Stats SA showing that there has been an increase in unemployment in the first quarter of 2023. This is not surprising given the economic climate that we have. But what Stats SA interestingly highlighted was the increasing levels of underemployment, where people's hours are being cut because of instances of load shedding and they can't work. What was your assessment of the first quarter data?
No, I think as you said, it's not surprising. Sorry, and good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. It's not unsurprising that unemployment remains high. The fact that it ticked up, the unemployment rate ticked up somewhat in the first quarter relative to the fourth quarter was actually to a large extent because discouraged work seekers that decline. In other words, the number of people that gave up or have given up looking for work, that number actually declined. So there was more people looking for work, and because we were not able to create sufficient jobs to meet those entrants into the labor force, the unemployment rate went up somewhat. I think it is important to bear in mind that if you compare the unemployment rate relative to 12 months ago, so relative to the first quarter of 2022, then the unemployment rate has come down quite nicely. So yes, on a quarter-on-quarter basis, it went up, which of course is not good news, but at least we are making progress relative to where we were this time last year.
But Hugo, we're not seeing employment in key sectors, I suppose, for the first quarter, and you can maybe give us a broader picture in key sectors like manufacturing, construction, mining, agriculture, which are big industries that are largely affected by the power cuts that have been the worst that they've ever been. And one wonders what the trajectory looks like if we continue with this energy crisis where key sectors are being impacted as they have been.
I think that's a very important point. So if you look at the sectors, the jobs created in the first quarter were mainly in the finance sector and then in the public sector. So more the services related parts of the economy, whereas the production side or those sectors that are most exposed to the power crisis, as you suggest, they struggle. And given the outlook that Eskom presented last week in their status report, suggesting that the power crisis may well become even worse in the next couple of months during winter, I think you are right, that the risk is that we lose even more jobs in those sectors in the upcoming quarter, or at least the point you made about the cutting back of the work hours. I think you may well continue to see that in some of these sectors that are most exposed to the electricity problems.
So coming up this week, Hugo, something that no South African wants to face at the moment, another interest rate hike. But before we go into what the MPC is likely to decide on Thursday, before that we've got inflation data, which has remained stubbornly high, currently sitting at around 7.1%. Food inflation, a huge issue here, transport costs as well. But interestingly, the Reserve Bank indicating in the last meeting that electricity is contributing about 0.5% to inflation, according to its calculations. What do you anticipate we will see on Wednesday when headline inflation data is released by Stats SA?
So we think, and this is also the consensus view, that you're likely to see a bit of a tick down in the inflation rate to 7% year on year. As you say, it was 7.1% in March. So it's a moderate move down in the rate of annual inflation. There are a couple of issues here, or a couple of uncertainties for this number. The one is, again, food. Will we see some moderation on food? We expect a little bit of that, but not significantly so. And then the insurance category is an uncertainty, because we know some of the big insurers, medical insurers like Discovery, for example, they increased their tariffs or the medical aid contributions, quite notably in April. So that will also be reflected in the April CPI number. So in general, if it comes out at around 7%, it is of course still an elevated number and still way above where the Reserve Bank would want that number to be.
So let's talk then about the Reserve Bank and what they're likely to decide as the Monetary Policy Committee. Do you anticipate, based on the rand, which has remained significantly weak against the US dollar, that they will remain as aggressive as they have been in the increasing of interest rates come Thursday? Are you anticipating that it will be 25 basis points or 50 basis points that they're going to be giving us on Thursday? What do you reckon?
So roughly 3 weeks ago, before we saw the rand come under the renewed and sustained pressure that we've seen the last week or so, we thought the Reserve Bank would increase by 25 basis points. But given the extent of the decline in the rand we've seen of late, not just against the US dollar, but also against the basket of currencies of our major trading partners, and the fact that it was not just that Russia, that the US-SA diplomatic spat that pushed the rand weaker, but the fact that it is not strengthened last week after those sort of diplomatic rows died down somewhat, the rand has remained under notable pressure. And we think as a result of that, the Reserve Bank or the Monetary Policy Committee will probably go by 50 basis points this week. So in other words, the same magnitude that they increased the policy rate by in the previous meeting in March.
Something no South African or homeowner, anyone with vehicle asset finance wants to hear this afternoon on a Sunday. Hugo Pienaar, we leave the discussion there. Thank you very much for your time. That is Chief Economist at the Bureau for Economic Research joining us this Sunday afternoon to speak about the economic week ahead. And unfortunately, it does look like the Monetary Policy Committee will decide to increase interest rates by 50 basis points come Thursday. And that is because of the significantly weaker rand, which has faced headwinds from various components within the economy, largely being energy as well.